My name is Darren, and I write the stories for this channel. Before we start tonight, I want you to think about something uncomfortable. Think about the last time you did something you have no memory of doing. A door you locked but cannot remember locking. A message you sent that you do not recall typing. A word you wrote that does not sound like you. Most of the time, we explain these away. Tiredness, distraction, the mind running on autopilot. But what if it was not autopilot? What if something else was using your hands while your conscious mind was looking the other way? And what if it had been doing it for much longer than you realized? Tonight's story takes place in Jurong West, a private nursing home called Evergreen Care Center on a quiet road near Boon Lay Drive. The kind of facility that looks clean and professional during visiting hours, where the staff smile correctly and the documentation is always in order, where 3 night shift nurses resigned in 14 months without giving a clear explanation to anyone, and where a patient in room 301 has been correctly identifying every person who will die in that building before they die, every single time, for 4 years, without anyone in management acknowledging it officially, without anyone being able to explain how. This account was sent in by a woman named Shalini, Indian Singaporean, 7 years of nursing experience before she joined this facility. She lasted 9 months on night shift. She has not worked in any healthcare setting since. She said she is sending this in because she needs people to understand that what happened to her was not a breakdown, not exhaustion, not the psychological toll of working around death. She said the proof is in her own notebook, in her own handwriting, on pages she has no memory of ever touching. Good to be back with all of you. I have been sitting with this one for a long time, and I want you to pay attention to every detail tonight, because the ending of this story only makes sense if you remember everything that comes before it. But first, we play our game. 3 words. Comment the one that feels right immediately. You have 5 seconds. Miss the window and do not comment. The hesitation already answered for you. Your 3 words are name, notebook, door. Clock starts now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lock it in. Remember it, because at the very end of tonight, I will tell you exactly what your choice reveals, and I promise you, not one of those 3 words means what you think it means right now. Now, let us begin. Shalini's first week at Evergreen Care Center was unremarkable. 46 residents across 3 floors, standard rotation, documentation, medication rounds, vitals checks, call responses. She had done this for 7 years across 2 other facilities. She knew the rhythms. She knew how to pace herself through a 9-hour night shift without burning out before 5 a.m. She thought she knew everything this kind of work could show her. Uncle Hawk Chai changed that on her 8th night. Room 301, end of the 3rd floor corridor. 81 years old, severe dementia. Could not consistently recognize his own daughter during Sunday visits. Could not tell you what year it was or what he had eaten for breakfast. During the day, he sat in his chair by the window and looked at the car park with the patient blankness of a man whose inner world had largely gone quiet. At night, he was different. Shalini was doing her 3 a.m. round when she heard him. Not loud, conversational, as if answering someone who had just asked him a question. She pushed his door open and found him sitting upright in bed, hands flat on the blanket, eyes open and focused on a point somewhere past the foot of the bed. He said a name, clearly, completely, first name and surname. Shalini did not recognize it immediately. She recognized it 40 minutes later when she responded to the call bell from room 214 and found Mr. Muthu, 79 years old, 2 floors down, sitting upright in his bed with his eyes open and his hand extended toward the door. He grabbed her wrist the moment she entered. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man whose file described him as physically deteriorating. He looked at her face with an expression she had never seen on a dying patient before. Not fear, not pain, recognition, as if she was exactly who he had been expecting. He said, "He already came to tell me, I am not afraid." Then his grip loosened, his eyes stayed open, his chest stopped moving. Shalini called the code. She went through every procedure correctly. She documented everything accurately. But she sat in the medication room for 20 minutes afterward, unable to stop shaking. Not because Mr. Muthu had died. She had seen death before. She was shaking because of his face, because of the specific expression on it in those final seconds. It was the face of a man who had been given advance notice and had spent his last hours making peace with it. She went back to room 301. Uncle Hawkchai was lying down, eyes closed, breathing slow and even, deeply asleep in the way that made it impossible to believe he had been sitting up 40 minutes ago speaking a dead man's name into the dark. Shalini opened her notebook and wrote down everything: the time, the name he had said, the time of Mr. Muthu's death, the things Mr. Muthu had said. She told herself it was coincidence. She told herself that for exactly 2 more months. 2 months, 14 deaths, 14 names called correctly from room 301 at 2:58 a.m. without a single exception. Shalini had stopped telling herself it was coincidence somewhere around the 6th death. By the 10th, she had started arriving at work 30 minutes early to sit in her car and prepare herself psychologically for what she already knew was coming. By the 14th, she had stopped sleeping properly on nights before her shift. She would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling and think about which name he would say tonight, whether she would know it immediately or only recognize it when she was standing over a body an hour later. She told nobody. Until the night staff nurse Michelle Pong found her sitting alone in the break room at 4 a.m. staring at her notebook with both hands pressed flat on the table. Michelle was Chinese-Singaporean, 38 years old, 8 years at this facility. Quiet, professional, the kind of person who noticed things without making a performance of noticing them. She sat down across from Shalini and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "You have been counting." It was not a question. Shalini showed her the notebook. Michelle read through it without expression. Then she put it down and folded her hands and said, "There were 3 nurses before you. You know this already. What they did not tell you during onboarding was why they left." She said the first nurse to notice the pattern was a woman named Kavitha, Indian-Singaporean, joined 2 years before Shalini, documented the same pattern within her first month, accurate every time. She had gone to management with her documentation and been told professionally and firmly that correlation was not causation and that nursing staff needed to be careful about developing superstitious frameworks around patient deaths as a psychological coping mechanism. Kavitha had accepted this explanation for approximately 3 weeks. Then she had started sitting outside room 301 every night between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. to observe Uncle Hawkchai directly. Michelle said she did this for 21 nights. Every night she would sit in the corridor with her back against the wall opposite his door and watch him through the gap. She kept a secondary notebook, separate from her official documentation. I saw it once. What she wrote in it was not about the names. She wrote that he was not calling names. She wrote that he was receiving them, that something was communicating the names to him and he was simply repeating what he was told. She wrote that the communication appeared in the 8 minutes before he spoke, that in those 8 minutes his lips moved without sound and his eyes tracked something that moved around the room in a specific pattern, always the same pattern: left wall, ceiling, foot of the bed, and then directly at the door. Shalini felt the back of her neck go cold. She said, "The door he was looking at, was it always his own door?" Michelle looked at her carefully. She said, "For the first 19 nights, yes, his own door. On the 20th night, it was different. He looked at the corridor instead, at the door of the break room where Kavitha stored her secondary notebook. Shalini said nothing. Michelle said, "Kavitha's phone has been disconnected for 8 months. Nobody from this facility has been able to reach her. Not management, not her colleagues, not the nursing board when they followed up on her registration renewal." She walked to the door of the break room. She said, "Whatever she found in that room, I do not think she left in time." She left. Shalini sat alone with her notebook. Then she got up and walked to the admin storage room at the end of the ground floor corridor, the one that required a key code she had memorized 3 weeks ago by watching the facility manager enter it without realizing she was being observed. She needed to find what Kavitha had found. The admin storage room smelled of old paper and disinfectant and something underneath both of those that Shalini could not name. She found the filing cabinet marked with patient admission records and worked through it with her torch until she found the folder marked Tan Hock Chai, room 301. The admission notes were sparse. Found wandering at Bukit Patak at 4:10 a.m. by an NEA worker. No identification. No family member ever came forward despite public notices. Assessed as having severe dementia on admission. Name assigned by facility administrator based on approximate age and ethnicity. Estimated age 80 to 85. No medical history available. No next of kin on record. He was nobody, officially. A man with no past that anyone could verify. At the bottom of the folder in a sealed plastic sleeve was a small notebook, older than anything else in the file. Cover worn smooth, pages yellowed at the edges. Shalini opened it. The handwriting was tiny, dense, covering every page from margin to margin. Names, hundreds of names written in columns with dates beside each one. She scanned through slowly. Then she started cross-referencing against what she knew. The names of patients who had died at Evergreen Care Center were in there. She found Mr. Muthu. She found the patient who had died on her 4th night, her 6th, her 9th. All of them, all with dates that matched their deaths exactly, recorded before they died. Some recorded months before they were even admitted to this facility. Her hands were steady. She was past the point where her hands shook. She turned to the back of the notebook. She found Kavitha's name, written in the same tiny handwriting, dated 14 months before Kavitha had joined Evergreen Care Center. Beside Kavitha's name, a single word written in a different ink, darker, added later. The word was early. Shalini stared at that word for a long time. Then she turned to the final written page. At the bottom, below a column of names she did not recognize, was her own name, Shalini D.O. Rajendran, written completely, accurately, with her full identification as it appeared on her nursing registration. Dated 3 weeks before she had applied for this position, 3 weeks before she had seen this facility's job advertisement, 3 weeks before she had any reason to know this place existed. Shalini closed the notebook. She sat on the floor of the storage room for 11 minutes. She counted the minutes on her watch because she needed something concrete to hold on to. Then she thought about what Kavitha had said, that she had found something she should not have found, that she was leaving before her name appeared. But Kavitha's name was already in this notebook 14 months before she arrived, which meant leaving had not helped, which meant the name appearing was not a warning about something that could be prevented. It was a record of something that had already been decided. Shalini put the notebook in her uniform pocket. She walked back to the 3rd floor. She needed to talk to Uncle Hock Chai directly. She needed to look at him clearly and ask him what he was and what this notebook was and why her name was in it. She needed answers before 2:58 a.m. It was 2:49 a.m. when she reached his door. She pushed it open. He was already sitting up, and he was looking directly at her, not through her, not past her, at her, with an expression that did not belong on the face of a man with severe dementia. Clear, patient, unsurprised. the expression of someone who had been expecting this conversation for a long time and was simply waiting for the other person to be ready to have it. He said, "You found the book." Shalini stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. She pulled the chair from the corner and sat across from him. She put the notebook on the bed between them. She said, "Who are you?" He looked at the notebook, then at her. His eyes were completely clear. No confusion, no wandering. Whatever dementia did to him during the day, it was not present at 2:49 a.m. in room 301. He said, "I am nobody. I have been nobody for a long time. It is easier that way." She said, "The names in this notebook, how do you know them?" He said, "I do not know them. I receive them. There is a difference. The knowing happens somewhere else. It comes to me the way a sound comes through a wall. I cannot stop it, and I stopped trying to stop it a long time ago." She said, "What is telling you these names?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Nothing is telling me. That is what I'm trying to explain to you. The names do not come from outside. They come from here." He touched the side of his head. "From people who are already connected to this place, people who pass through here, people who already know on some level what is going to happen. They know it the way you know something in a dream that you cannot explain after you wake up. I am just the one who is awake enough to hear it." Shalini said, "My name is in that notebook, written before I knew this place existed." He said, "Yes." She said, "Did you write it?" He looked at his hands. He held them up. His fingers were curled inward at every joint, rigid, the hands of a man who had not been able to grip anything for years. The admission notes had documented this. Severe joint contracture, medically incapable of holding a pen. He said, "I have not been able to write for 3 years." The room was completely silent. Shalini looked at the notebook on the bed between them. Then she looked at her own hands. She thought about the 9 months of night shifts, the hours between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. sitting at the nurse's station, the strange blankness she sometimes felt in that window of time, the way she would look up from her documentation and realize she could not account for 20 or 30 minutes. She had attributed it to tiredness, to the way the mind drifts during the deep hours of a night shift. She opened her own notebook, the documentation notebook she had been keeping since her first week, the one she brought to every shift. She turned to the back pages, the pages she had never written on. They were not empty. 40 pages of names, written in her own handwriting, tight and small and covering every line. Names she did not recognize, dates she had not yet reached, written across what she estimated to be all 9 months of her time at this facility, written during the blink periods, during the 20 and 30-minute gaps she could not account for. Her hands began to shake for the first time. She turned to the very last written page. Below the final column of names, a single line, written in her own hand, in the same ink as her conscious documentation. It said, "I know what I am now. I know what we all are here, and I am not afraid anymore." She looked up at Uncle Hawk Chai. He was lying down, eyes closed, breathing slow and even, already returned to wherever he went between 3 a.m. and the next night. Whatever clarity had inhabited him for those 11 minutes was gone. Shalini sat in the chair and did not move for a long time. Then she heard it. From somewhere down the corridor, a sound so quiet she would have missed it if the building had not been completely still. A scratching sound, rhythmic, patient, coming from behind a closed door she had passed every night for 9 months without ever hearing it make a sound. She walked to the door. She pressed her hand flat against it. The scratching continued, one letter at a time, deliberate, unhurried, as if whatever was making it had all the time it needed. She put her ear against the wood. The scratching stopped. Silence for 3 seconds. Then, from directly on the other side of the door, separated from her only by 4 centimeters of wood, came a sound she had heard before. A sound she recognized immediately and with complete certainty. It was her own handwriting, the specific rhythmic scratch of her own pen moving across paper. The exact sound she made when she wrote in her notebook during the night shift. She knew it the way you know the sound of your own footsteps. She stepped back from the door. She looked down at her notebook in her hands. She opened it to the back pages again, to the names she had no memory of writing. She found the most recently dated entry. Tonight's date, 3:04 a.m., 4 minutes from now. One name, written alone on the last line, below everything else, her own. She stood in the corridor of Evergreen Care Center at 3:01 a.m. and understood what Kavita had understood, what the notebook had always been, not a record of deaths, a record of the moment each person who passed through this place became aware of what they were carrying, what they had always been carrying. The knowledge that some people are simply built closer to the end of things than others, and that the end has a way of recognizing its own. She did not run. There was nowhere to run to. She resigned by text at 6:30 a.m. She walked out of Evergreen Care Center at 7 a.m. without speaking to anyone. She has not opened her notebook since that night. It sits in a drawer in her flat in Clementi. She does not need to open it. She already knows what is written on the pages after the last entry she remembers making. She knows because she wrote them. She just doesn't remember doing it. And she has stopped trying to remember, because remembering would mean accepting what Uncle Hawk Chai told her that night, that the names do not come from outside, that the knowledge lives in the people who pass through places like this, that she had known every name in that notebook before she wrote it, had known her own name, had written it there herself in a moment her conscious mind refused to hold on to, had written the date, the time, and nothing after it, because whatever came after the date and the time, she had not yet lived through. Now, what word did you choose at the beginning of tonight? Name? You chose the thing that identifies you, the thing that separates you from everyone else. Shalini's name was written in that notebook 3 weeks before she knew this place existed, before she had any reason to be connected to it. Her name was there before she arrived, which means her arrival was never a choice. It was always the next step in something that had already been decided. You chose the name, which means you already understand that knowing something is coming does not mean you can stop it. It only means you have more time to think about it. Notebook. You chose the record, the documentation, the proof that something happened even when the mind refuses to hold the memory of it happening. Shalini kept a notebook because she needed to trust something outside her own perception. In the end, the notebook was the thing that showed her she could not trust her own perception at all. You chose the notebook, which means part of you already suspects that the record you keep of your own life has gaps in it that you have never looked at directly. Door. You chose the boundary, the thing between here and whatever is on the other side. Shalini stood at that door at 3:01 a.m. and heard her own handwriting on the other side of it. She did not open it. She chose not to know what was making that sound in her voice. You chose the door at the beginning of tonight, before you knew what was behind it. That choice has already been made, and unlike Shalini, you have been listening to this story with the door open the entire time. Thank you for watching. My name is Darren. I am your writer for this channel. Leave your word in the comments. And if you keep a diary or a notebook, check the back pages tonight. Check them carefully. Because the handwriting that belongs to you and the handwriting that only looks like it belongs to you are not always the same thing.